Human geography class, and the title of chapter 2 is Population and Health. Today, we're going to start a lesson called Population in Our World, and we're going to try to answer the question of where are the 8 billion people in our world distributed? Where are they? Why are they? The second part of our chapter, we're going to try to answer that question, why more specifically, and there's all kinds of variables that go into answering the question of why people are distributed around the world in this way. There's a lot of great maps that we're going to be talking about today, which is one of my favorite parts of human geography class, so look forward to doing a lot of geography work within this lesson today as well. The first thing we're going to talk about is population and geography, and there's one question that we have to answer from the start, and it's why do we study population geography? Population geography. Well, number one, the reason why geographers study this is because there are more people alive living on Earth now than ever, okay? There has been a huge increase up to the 21st century of the population in our world, and it has quietly slowed a little bit as we move on to our next century. Geographers are very interested in answering the question where, and geographers are very interested, especially answering the question, why is this? All the population growth basically is in developing countries, all right? Smaller countries, developing countries, not developed countries like the major powers of the world. Geographers are hoping to, and frequently try to find out the answer to why this is happening. Population growth in the 20th century, like I just said, was greater than the population growth in the 21st century. It's very important to understand that our population is not growing as fast as it once did. Our video and the bell ringer that we did on Africa the other day talks about how governments are trying to combat overpopulation in these developing countries and so on, for example. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to be talking about here. Now, the first term we're going to get into is something called carrying capacity. And I want you to take a couple seconds and I want you to look at that image there, and I want you to come up with a definition of what carrying capacity could possibly mean. All right, it's a great little image which basically will probably help you to remember what this term means. You got a bunch of goldfish in a fishbowl that's overflowing, and then you got 3 little guys in the fishbowl that are very happy with smiles on their faces. So let's get into it. Carrying capacity is the maximum population of a size of a species that the environment can absolutely sustain. And there's that word sustain or sustainability again. We did a great lesson on that in last chapter, and you should have a really good idea about what that term means, okay? Now, carrying capacity has a huge enemy. And the enemy of carrying capacity is overpopulation. Overpopulation is when the number of people exceeds what the environment can prepare for them and support for them. People are arguing for many years that the world is already overpopulated and overburdened with too many people, and governments are forced to make decisions on how they can combat that. But that's basically what carrying capacity is all about, and how geographers try to find the balance between people and available resources. Now, another word that we're going to talk about that's associated with this is demography. Demography is the study of population characteristics, all right? Not just the number of people that are living in an area, but demographers go into looking at all kinds of things. They look statistically at how people are distributed around the world according to number of births, according to their age, according to their gender, according to their occupation, their job, their health. Obviously, one way to keep track of this here in the United States, for example, is by taking the census. All right, the census that is controlled by the United States Bureau of the Census is a great way for us to figure out those numbers. When I just filled out my census the other day, I had to fill out how many people lived in my household, how many boys, how many girls, my children. They were talking about gender, they were talking about age, they were talking about all these things that demographers can use, and that's what demography is all about. It's a study of population characteristics, including age, gender, health, jobs, and so on. Now, next part of class we're going to talk about is how there are portions that geographers have separated people into around the world. Population portions. There are 7 of them. Now, this is a fantastic map that shows you the 7 population portions that we have in our world. Now, one very fun fact about each one of these colored portions is that each portion contains just over 1 billion people. 1 billion people around there in each one of these 7 portions of the world. Now, one fascinating thing to look at is you can take all of North America, Latin America, South America, Australia, and New Zealand, and combine their population. They have just over 1 billion people there. What's fantastic is you can look at India, and India has that many people in itself. One thing that really should open your eyes to the population of places around the world is when you look at China. Look at China and how China is absolutely had to be split in half, okay? China to the eastern part and the north and south central part has 1 billion people itself. The other half of China is basically put into a portion with, the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia, Iran, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and so on. You would think that the population of Europe and Russia and Northern Africa would be huge as well, okay? But we'll answer the question why there's just over 1 billion people in that blue portion itself. Another thing that you guys don't realize is the amount of people that are on the islands in Southeast Asia. Over there where Vietnam is and Laos and Thailand, the islands of Indonesia we'll look at a little bit closer later, but if you combine the population of those islands with Korea and with Japan, there's 1 billion people there. 1 billion people there. And the majority of those people are in the islands of Indonesia, not Korea and Japan like you would think. Now, next part of class is we're going to talk about population concentrations, and we're going to start answering the question of why there are so many people clustered in these areas, okay? So a population concentration, the word concentration can also be a cluster, Now, 2/3 of the world's population basically is clustered into 4 regions, okay? The most populated areas of our world of 2/3 of our world are basically broken down into 4 different regions. Now, you have East Asia, you have South Asia, you have Europe, and you have Southeastern Asia. Those are the 4 most populated clusters or concentrations of people in our world. So let's start at the top of the map and look at the European cluster, okay? Europe is considered one of these 4 regions because of the amount of people that live in that area. The reason why there are so many people living in that area and there's a high concentration of people for a small land area is because it's a very easy place to live in. The majority of the people live around the major rivers, all right? Europe is blessed with major rivers, which allows for them to be highly, highly populated for a small area of land. That land that I'm talking about is also fertile for growth as well, all right? So that's why the Europeans have this cluster of people, which is included in one of the 4 regions where 2/3 of the population of the world is clustered. The next thing that we're going to do is go right to Asia, because there are 3 regions there in Asia that basically help to make up 2/3 of the world's population. When you look at the South Asia cluster, okay, that's India. That's India. Obviously, it's a great mix of resources. It's a great mix of geographic features and a great mix of ways that people can survive and live and be heavily, heavily populated in a small area. If you look at the East Asia cluster, obviously China is going to dominate the population there because it is the world's most populous country. All right, China is, and the 4th largest country as far as land area is concerned. All right. The next thing we're going to look at, as I promised you, is Southeast Asia. All right, the Southeastern Asia cluster there, you wouldn't think that Indonesia and the islands, which Indonesia basically has about 14,000 islands, you would not think that it would be very populated, but it is. All right, there are tons of river valleys, there are tons of deltas, all the water there that helps people to survive and so on allows for them to be a cluster. Now, you can focus on the rest of the world as well and answer the question like, why aren't they included? All right, why aren't they included in this? Well, Africa is pretty unique, all right? It's pretty unique because you can see it's a heavy populated area to the south, all right? Just north of the equator and south of the equator, all the way down to South Africa, is very, very populated, okay? But there is that huge little blank area of the map in Africa, which basically is encompassed by deserts, all right? People can't live there, all right? They can't live there, and that's why they're definitely sparsely populated there, because it's so dry. You can't grow anything in a desert, all right? If you look over to the Western Hemisphere, you can see that South America and North America, basically the populations are on the coast. The populations are on the coast. In the area to the north central part of South America, that's the Amazon River Basin, all right? Down the west coast, of South America are the Andes Mountains, which it's hard to live in those places. And then you can see up top in you can see Mexico in parts of Central America have very arable land, and a lot of people that live there for that reason. And then when you get into the United States and Canada, obviously the focus of the population in the United States is along the northeast coast and the west coast of California. I think you would probably know the answer why Canada isn't really is sparsely populated, because most of the area in Canada and Greenland is frozen. All right, the land is frozen all the time. The ground is frozen all the time. It mentions permafrost there for you science folks in the crowd, and it definitely is not easy to grow crops in that area of the world. Animals can't survive, and that's why there's not a lot of humans that live there. Now, we worked with cartograms in chapter 1 for a reason. It was to prepare you for the cartograms that we're going to look at here in our future lessons, and today's one of those lessons. Now, cartogram, obviously, this one shows the size of the countries that are depicted by their population. So if you just glance at that map real quick, you can see the discrepancies in the size of places compared to the population that they have, all right? So you can see, obviously, the Southeast Asia are huge areas because of their population. One thing that I like to look at over in the Western Hemisphere is Canada, all right? Canada has this huge land area, but look how it's depicted on this cartogram just north of the United States. It's just a little speck. You look at Canada's land area I like to compare it to Bangladesh over in Southeast Asia. You can see that Bangladesh is a small little dot of a country on the map, but as far as population is concerned, it's a big area. It's a big country on a cartogram because of the population that they have in a small area, all right? So this map does a real good job of showing you the country's size according to their population, not according to their land area. Now, there's a Greek word called Ecumen, which means inhabited, and it's a real easy concept to understand. Ecumen is the portions of Earth that are actually occupied by humans, all right? This map does a real good job of showing you that. So we're looking at 5000 BC. You can see that the map is showing you the hunters and gatherers, basically in the light green color, which basically were found, as we know, pretty much all over the world, except for the polar regions there in Greenland and up there in the northeastern and central part of Canada. The dark green area shows the small-scale agriculture that was going on, and then an intensive settlement is one that is set up more like moving towards closely a civilization type of area, okay? So right at the in between the BCs and the ADs there in year 1, you can see how it was a little bit different than 5000 BC. You can see that there are definitely more farming areas, definitely more civilizations. You can see the civilizations that were forming around the river valleys from your world history class. In Africa, in the year 1, you can see the civilizations forming in Egypt. You can see the civilizations forming in Europe, civilizations forming between the rivers in Mesopotamia, India, China, and then the civilizations that we know about in the Americas, all right? Over in the Western Hemisphere, you can see the Aztecs, you can see the Mayas, and you can see the Inca, for example, along the coast of Western South America. When we get into 1500, you can see the colors are starting to get a little bit darker, all right? More civilizations, more agriculture, and then by the year 1900, you can see exactly what's going on. There's a huge decrease in the amount of hunting and gathering going on, and more focus on growing food, agriculture, and so on. One fun fact about this concept is 3/4 of the world, listen to this, 3/4 of the people that live on basically in the world live on 5% of the Earth's surface. 3/4 of the world live on only 5% of the Earth's surface. Now, one question that you might be thinking to yourself is why? Why? So let's answer that question. Why do 3/4 of the people that live on Earth only live on 5% of the entire Earth's surface? Well, if you thought about it, the majority of the Earth is covered in water. In fact, 1/10 of the Earth is covered by ice. So there is not that much of the Earth's surface that is very areable or that people have the ability to live on, all right? And that's why 3/4 of the world only live on 5% of the Earth's surface. Now, the last concept that we're going to talk about today is something called population density. Population density. Now, that word density should not be a new concept to you because that is a concept that we talked about in chapter 1, okay? Density, remember, is the frequency with which something exists within a given unit of area. So what is population density? Well, population density is the number of humans that are living within an area. Now, we measure, or geographers measure, population density in three different ways. Okay? The first way is called arithmetic density. Arithmetic density. Now, arithmetic density is a very simple concept to understand. It's the easiest, and it's what geographers use a lot to try to answer questions about the why people are distributed around the world. Arithmetic density is the population divided by the land area. Population divided by the land area. Okay? Now, we use this to divide the population by the land area. It's very simple, all right? So if you're looking around the world, all right, you can see that this map represents the people that are living per square kilometer, okay? Start with the bottom, start with the gray area, so there's no data, all right, up there in Greenland and so on. It's no fun to live in Greenland. It's cold a lot, and permafrost definitely does not help things. Below 25 people per square area. Below 25 people per square area. This is Australia. Australia, really, people only really live along the east coast of Australia. The rest of the country is very hard to live in, just really tough, rugged country. You look at Russia, it's so big, all right, as a size, the number of people don't match its size, all right? Obviously, Canada, parts of South America. You can look at Africa for that light yellow color, okay? Only 25, below 25 people per square kilometer live in these places. If you look at the darker orange, 25 to 49 people per square kilometer, here's the United States, here's here's Alaska. Colombia and Venezuela in South America, you can see, is represented by this color. 50 to 99 people per square area. Not that many colors like that around the world. You can see some. Mexico, for example, is one. You can see some countries in Africa. You can see Spain. And then look at the 100 people per square kilometer and where those are located, all right? Of course you have China. Of course you have India. Of course you have the countries of Europe. But look at the islands off of our coast in Florida, all right? You can see Cuba. You can see Puerto Rico. You can see some islands there in the Caribbean where it's a small area and there's a lot of people that live in the square kilometers of those islands off of our coast here in Florida, okay? So geographers use this, and the way that you basically measure arithmetic density is you take the population and you divide it by the land area, all right? And that's the first way that we measure population density. This one's called arithmetic density. The second way that we measure population density is called physiological density. This is pretty easy to understand too. It's the number of people that live in an area, okay, per unit of arable land. Land that can be farmed, okay? So obviously the people are distributed around the world on these maps according to how the land and the resources available, especially the amount of land that can be farmed, that is farmable land. All right, so obviously no data once again for Greenland. All right, as a step up, you can see these are people per square kilometer of arable land on Earth. All right, below 200 people per square kilometer of arable land on Earth. All right, you can see Canada, Russia, Australia, parts of South America again. In fact, you could probably look at the three maps that I'm going to show you, the one for arithmetic density, physiological density, and the next map that I'll show you on agricultural density, and they'll all pretty much look the same, all right, because it has to do with the resources that are available on Earth, okay? So this is the number of people, once again, per unit of arable land that can farm. Obviously, going up the chart, 200 to 499 people, there's your United States, Alaska, same again, and then obviously 1,000 or more people per fertile land. You can see the islands of Indonesia. We talked about the fertile river valleys they have and so on. China, Colombia, Venezuela, along the coast of South America and so on, okay? And that's what we mean by physiological density, the number of people per unit of arable land on Earth. Agricultural density is the last thing that we're going to talk about today. It's the third way that geographers measure population density. This is very easy to understand because this has to do with the farmers, okay? This is the ratio of the number of farmers to the amount of arable land on Earth. The ratio of farmers to the amount of arable land on Earth. Now, this map is a little bit different, okay? So once again, you see the node datas. Below 10 farmers per square kilometer of arable land, there it is in the United States, all right? The number of farmers in the United States is a small ratio according to the amount of arable land there is, all right? You can see Russia, you can see Australia, okay? Going up the chart, 10 to 99 farmers per square kilometer of arable land. It's the lighter green color there in the middle, all right? So you see South America, you see Africa, you can see parts of the Middle East and parts of Central and South Central Asia there. Surprisingly, 100 to 499 farmers per kilometer of arable land there in China, there in India. You might be asking the question, like, why aren't there more, okay? Well, in those places, remember, there's other occupations for people to work in these days, so not everybody's a farmer, okay? And really, the largest amount of farmers that we have on Earth per square kilometer of arable land that can be farmed, you can see there in Africa, all right? Look at Egypt and the Nile River Valley there. You can see the countries that there in South or in Central Africa, all right? More farmers in Africa pretty much than any place on Earth because that is a way for them to make money. That's a way for them to make money as those countries are what we call developing once again. Now, there's a very other simple reason why population is distributed around the world, and we'll finish it up. You got to understand from your world history lessons, the Eastern Hemisphere was inhabited by people first, okay? The populations were growing in Africa first, millions and millions of years ago. We talked about the Neanderthals in Europe. We talked about the great migrations of people around the world. So all of these maps seem to have more populated areas in the Eastern Hemisphere than the Western Hemisphere. And one very simple answer for that is that people that were living in the Eastern Hemisphere on Earth had a head start before the great migrations took people through the northeast part of China up into Russia, across the Bering Strait, and then filtering into the Americas, which is a widely accepted opinion and view about the great migrations of people on Earth.